Hi, welcome to Justin's Morning Coffee. All right, so today I want to talk a little bit more about the 7 basic plots and specifically something related to overcoming the monster that I recently just noticed. Now, if you go back and watch the first Overcoming the Monster video I made, talked a little bit about the geography of the plot type. On the one side, you've got the hero and the innocent, and oftentimes the mentor in the world of habitable order, the world of peace and tranquility. And then you've got this border, and on the border you have this border figure, and then out in the waters of chaos you've got the monster, or the monster represents chaos. So you've got this kind of walled city, you might think, and then you've got the flood outside. And the story is about how these different characters relate to that threat of chaos that comes from the outside. So you can kind of plot it out this way. I did a couple of different movies. Overcoming the monster in Star Wars, who's the hero? It's Luke Skywalker. Who's the innocent? It's, Princess Leia. The mentor is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Han Solo is the border figure. And of course, Darth Vader is the monster. So that you can always think that border figure is going to be part monster and part civilized. Part uncivilized and part civilized, half and half. But that border figure can slide either way depending on how you want to write the story. So sometimes the border figure can be mostly monster and with just a toe in civilization, or it can be mostly civilized with just a toe over the line of chaos. For example, you can go to Terminator, okay? So in Terminator, you've got Sarah Connor, who is the protagonist. And then you've got, the child who is the innocent. And then you've got this Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who in Terminator 1, James Cameron's Terminator 1, is the villain. And so the border figure is John Connor. The border figure is the one who comes from the future. So he's there to protect this sanctity of human life, to protect that from the monster from the future. He comes from the future. So that little part of monster that he has is the gun that he has, the fighting skills that he has, the use of force against force, right? So that's what he has to have in order to confront this monster. But of course, what happened in Terminator is that Arnold Schwarzenegger became such a big star as a result of the movie. They wanted to bring him back, but they didn't want to bring him back as the villain. So what did they do in Terminator 2? In Terminator 2, they switched it up. And they moved him over. They might say they moved him a little bit more towards the side. He's not the protagonist. Sarah Connor is still the protagonist. But they moved Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, the Terminator, as the border figure. So now he's the one half in and half out. So let's take a look at a scene there.
You forgot to say please. Get him off me!
Okay, so as you can see from that clip, basically James Cameron, the director, is playing around with this idea. We think Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to be the villain because he was in the first movie, but then we find out that there's a new villain and Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually protecting.
Are you the legal guardian of John Connor?
Took off on his bike this morning so he could be anywhere.
There was a guy here this morning looking for him, too.
I wouldn't worry about him. Thanks for your cooperation.
Get down.
But he still has that element of the monstrous in him, as evidenced in that scene where he's beating up everyone in the bar. He doesn't care, has no care for human life. He has no care for any, it's just this computer programming. So that's one of the that is one of the characteristics of the border figure. Is usually they beat by their own drum. They're in it for their own self-interest. In this case, the programming, the computer programming that was put into him to protect Sarah Connor and her son. So you're not going to be able to reason with the border figure, just like Sheriff Brody couldn't do that with Quint in Jaws. You have to just basically work within their rules, and they're not going to work within the rules of society. So now let's take a look at how it's done in King Kong Skull Island. It's pretty much the same idea. We're used to seeing King Kong as some kind of of the villain that everybody is against, but in this case, they encounter Kong, and they find out there is actually a different monster. There's a monster that is worse than this monster, and as it turns out, this monster is protecting the world from this one. So there's a principle there. So let's take a look at that scene. Okay, so see how it's essentially the same game, the same archetype. Initially, you think, okay, this must be the monster. This is King Kong, but then you realize that he marches by the beat of his own drum, and he's there for a reason. And it's symbolized with this, the famous little tiny woman in the ginormous paw, the ginormous hand of the ape. And the forces of chaos out here represented by this snake-like lizard. You can tell that this thing is way more evil than this. Maybe it's because it's more reptilian and this is more mammalian. So this feels a little bit more normal to us. But basically you see that this is defeated by this border figure. But then in the end, when male and female come together, symbolizing community, symbolizing that tranquility that you need for civilization and society, what happens to King Kong? He goes on his way. There's a sense that the border figure, the gargoyle figure, is supposed to be on the margin, supposed to be out there on the edge of chaos and order. And so King Kong is not going to hang out and be your buddy. He's not going to be your pet. He's not going to be, he's going to go off and do his thing. This is kind of the similar trope that you find in Westerns, where after the enigmatic gunslinger, again, the border figure protagonist, once that person rides off and finishes, defeating the chaos, defeating the evil, they ride off, right? Because they're not civilizable, you might say. And these figures, they somehow exist in the world. They exist in our reality, and they're there for a reason, at least in our stories. Okay, so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about it in terms of The Dark Knight. and Christopher Nolan's trilogy here. And if you think about it, this series, you've got Christian Bale, of course. He's in the beginning, the hero and the innocent. He's the one who sees his parents shot, and the protagonist. But by the end of that first movie, Batman Begins, he has become the border figure, standing against the antagonist here, which is Liam Neeson, right? And what is that? That is essentially the word for it is the gargoyle. So by the time we get to the second movie, which is The Dark Knight, okay, now you're getting into a realm where essentially you have the border figure as protagonist. You've brought him from the innocent protagonist, and by the end of the first movie, he's now become that gargoyle figure, and now he starts the second movie as the gargoyle, as the border figure, and then of course our Joker is the same thing as the shark in Jaws, represents that chaos that the Batman stands against. But what's interesting about doing it this way is that you have now a very complex protagonist, because the protagonist is actually the one who's half in and half out. So if you look at that second movie, the Dark Knight, with probably one of the best portrayals of Joker that we have in the whole Batman world, you can see this in the figure of Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent moves from being part of this side of order, this side of habitable order, law and order, the White Knight, as they call him in the movie, and then he gets half evil and half good. He becomes Two-Face. So there's this kind of shift. You can see this kind of shifting over from one side to the other. So you can kind of think of it this way. Over here you've got the tower, and this is all of your people that are trying to keep law and order, to keep everybody safe, to have everybody safe and sound inside this realm of habitable order, an orderly city. But then you've got this flood over here. So you've got the Tower of Babel over here, and then you've got the flood over here, and there's a danger in both. This is kind of, I think, what's really genius about Christopher Nolan's Batman series, Batman trilogy, is that he explores the danger over here as well as the danger over here. So by the time you get to the third movie, they've defeated chaos, they've defeated the Joker, but now they're completely, they've become tyrannical order. They've become the Tower of Babel. So it's very fascinating to me. You could actually plot the Batman series on top of my two mountains system. You could think of Bruce Wayne as embodying some elements of rags to riches in the very beginning of the trilogy, as he's an innocent boy. He's not poor, so it's not completely a rags to riches story. He comes from wealth, but he does lose his parents, and orphanhood is one of the prototypes of the rags to riches plot. He then encounters the Joker in the second movie and moves into this overcoming the monster phase. But by the end, there's the tragedy of Two-Face. By the end of the second movie, he really tumbles down into what I call the Quest Valley, the Valley of Exile. And then the final movie you could see as a rebirth, because he basically has to rekindle his passion for meaning in life and for justice and for basically accomplishing what he set out to accomplish in the very, very beginning of all the three movies of trying to figure out what to do in the face of injustice. When he first witnesses the death of his parents, that's the enigma right there. The world that we live in. What do you do when you have the forces of chaos, the forces of violence coming in to your family, your familial setting, and enacting some kind of injustice, some kind of a murder, some kind of a tragedy? Do you become someone who seeks vengeance, in which case you become an agent of chaos, or do you find a way to navigate between those two worlds, to navigate between these two worlds, right? The temptation is to build a Tower of Babel and force out all, what would you say, all anomalies, all dissent, and basically force order on everybody, right? And then you become a Tower of Babel, and you become a tyrannical system that doesn't allow for any difference, doesn't allow for any nuance, doesn't allow for anything exceptions, doesn't allow for anything that you didn't think about. Or do you go all the way to the side of the Joker and become the Flood, which destroys everything, pulls everything down, flips everything on its head? And that's the two worlds that Batman is having to navigate in this trilogy. Okay, so that's the only point that I wanted to make today. I think what I might do is maybe I'll do a video on the Dark Knight trilogy. And exploring this idea between the role of the protagonist and the role of the border figure in these Overcoming the Monster stories, because I think it really does shed a lot of light on just the dynamics of reality that Nolan is really playing with in that series, and I do think it's really genius. So that's it for now. Leave a comment, let me know what you think, and check back, and I will do probably a more in-depth version of this argument using clips from Batman. So thank you, and have a good day.